Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Today we'll be doing a full set review of the Seas and Shores Mystery Miniatures by WizKids. This is a very interesting group of miniatures to say the least. Unlike the Glory of the Giants miniatures, which we reviewed in a recent video, which can all stomp you to death, these ones can drown you to death. Though the box itself doesn't say so, these miniatures seem to be designed to be used in, Ghost of Saltmarsh, or any other campaign that takes place on a beach, or a pirate ship, one of the two. Each miniature is uniquely sculpted and beautifully crafted. I have no grievances for just about any of the actual models themselves, and unlike Glory of the Giants, there are no warband repaints, so that's a bonus for me. There are 48 miniatures in total, 13 of them being large miniatures, and 34 and a half of them being medium and small. We will also be reviewing the Seas and Shores Premium Miniature, the Maw of Sekolah, as well. We have a lot of stuff to review today, so without further ado, let's get started. Ooh, starting off strong, looks like we got ourselves a pirate, and by the look of those pointy ears and facial hair, I'd say a half-elf. Could also get away with being a human as well. A lot of versatility with this one. Though the design's relatively basic, to say the least, I like it. It definitely passes as some kind of bandit that could show up with a horde of others just like him. He doesn't stand out much, and granted, he doesn't need to. He could get away with being a great swashbuckler as well. Pirates have a challenge rating of 1/4, and as for the miniature itself, I think it's fine. Previously mentioned, it doesn't stand out, but it doesn't need to. You could easily use this miniature as some kind of town guard or some kind of military man as well. It could even be a player character, perhaps a rogue or a fighter, a low level one of course, but still I think it passes. If it wasn't warped at the ankles, I'd give it a higher number, but until then, I give it a 5 out of 10. Next up, we have ourselves a sea elf. As it's well known, elves generationally adapt to their surroundings, and can be found just about anywhere in the vast Dungeons & Dragons multiverse. From mountains to forests, to even the stars above, and the sea, I guess. They are the avatar the way of water to a wood elf's normal avatar. To make them even cooler, they became a player race in Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse. They have resistance to cold damage and can breathe underwater. To top it all off, they have a special ability called Friend of the Sea, where they can communicate a simple idea to any beast with a swim speed, though you can't understand them back. A sea elf has a challenge rating of 1/4. As for the miniature itself, I think it's pretty cool. With no particular recognizable gear in its arms or any spells that it's using, it can get away with being just about any class. That, or it can be used as a harmless NPC. That, and I enjoy the little tattoo on its leftmost shoulder. It's a nice little splash of detail. 6 out of 10. Next up, we have one of my favorite Dungeons & Dragons critters, the Locathah. These adorable walking fish live in their own small communities and rarely venture out. They're mostly neutral creatures, but tend to lean toward more of a good alignment. The best part about them is that they are actually a playable race. They have a swim speed and can breathe both water and air, and they seem to be pretty good in perception checks as well. As for the miniature itself, I really like this one. If you get a whole bunch of them, it can be a small little warband of them. Later in the review, we'll also see another Locathah, which looks similar to this, though a little bit of a different paint job and holding a crossbow as well. Regarding that, besides the Nolzur's Marvelous Miniatures version, we don't seem to have many Locathah miniatures available, so having two come in one set is a blessing. I absolutely love this little guy. His paint job is just perfect for what he is, so I give him a solid 7 out of 10. Well, we certainly are having our fill of aquatic player races. Up next, we have a Tortle. Tortles at first glance may seem to be very content with where they are. However, that can't be further from the truth. Ask any Tortle and they'll tell you the same thing. that they'd rather be somewhere else. You see, turtles, they have their home on their back, so they're not really looking for a place to belong. Rather, they just want to get the most out of life. And for most turtles, that's adventuring. Like Locathahs, they also are a playable race, though an underrated one at that. Your average turtle has a claw attack, and because of its shell, has a base armor class of 17. As for the miniature itself, I really like it. You can tell by first glance that they use some black oil to really make all those details in the shell and pebbly skin pop. I enjoy the battle axe it's holding. It can be used for any kind of fighter or barbarian, or it can just be some humble NPC chopping down some wood. Plenty of great uses for this miniature, and I really like it. I give it an 8 out of 10. Up next, we have an Amphisbaena. Yeah, Amphisbaena. Funny name. An Amphisbaena is exactly what it looks like. It is a pit viper with 2 heads. Because of its 2 heads, it has advantage on perception checks and other saving throws against being blinded, charmed, deafened, frightened, stunned, and even being knocked unconscious. They have a challenge rating of 1/2, and as for the miniature itself, I really like this one. Just like the turtle we reviewed, the black oil applied on this miniature really makes all the scales absolutely pop. I also enjoy its menacing, striking pose. Indiana Jones would be having an absolute heyday. Overall, this miniature is really well done. I give it a 7 out of 10. Up next, we have a sahagan. Sahagans can be found in any bodies of water, from oceans, to seas, to lakes, to even your neighbor's pool. They're usually evil creatures and live in colonies deep underwater or near the abyss, though they rarely miss an opportunity to surface to invade nearby ships. They're basically the orcs of the sea, highly superstitious and angry all the time. Though they despise all other creatures that aren't like them, they seem to have a definite hatred towards sea elves the most. Because of this, sahagan and sea elf colonies are in constant war with one another. A sahagan has a challenge rating of 1/2 and a special ability unique to it called Shark Telepathy, where a sahagan can magically command any shark within 120 feet of it. As for the miniature itself, I like her. She is definitely a sahagan. Sahagan are normally depicted with more of a lime green skin, though this one is clearly blue. Despite the fact that it's a completely different color, I feel like it won't really stand out too much compared to other sahagan miniatures. In fact, it might even help. I mean, who knows, this could be a wonderful sahagan NPC miniature. I like her spear as well, though a little bit warped at the end, and I'm sure that there are some out there that are even worse. It wasn't too bad to get back in place for a while. We do actually have a total of 3 sahagan miniatures in this entire box set, so we'll have plenty to compare it to. Until then, I give this one a 6 out of 10. Next up, we have a giant crab. Not going to waste too much time on this one. You see, this one is exactly what it looks like, a giant crab. Yeah, there's actually a couple in this box set that I just kind of have to blast through because there's not too much to be said about them. The giant crab is a medium creature with a challenge rating of 1/4. It's able to use its big meaty claws to grapple up to 2 victims, 1 for each claw. As for the miniature itself, I like it. I think it's very well painted, and I think it would make a great druid wild shape. Besides that, I don't see it getting too much use at your table besides a simple polymorph or wild shape. I give it a 6 out of 10. Up next, we have ourselves a Merfolk. They live in small tribes under the waves, and will often branch out from those tribes to make adventures of their own. They're neutral in nature, but tend to lean more towards good. Though no matter what alignment, don't think about wronging one, lest you find yourself impaled at the end of one of their tridents. They're amphibious and are able to breathe both water and air, though they prefer water. The average Merfolk has a challenge rating of 1/4. As for the miniature itself, I think it's very well detailed. I like the details on its tail and on its different fins as well. I found that the trident seems to come warped, which isn't ideal, but overall, it's a perfectly fine miniature. I give it a 6 out of 10. Up next, we have a reef shark. Wow. You know, when I first heard that they were coming out with a box set called Seas and Shores, you know what I said? I said they should definitely have a reef shark in there, you know? And boy did they provide. Wow, look at it go. I'm just kidding, I actually kinda like it. The reef shark has a challenge rating of 1/2 and a special ability called Pack Tactics, to where if at least one of the shark's allies is within 5 feet of one of its enemies, it gets advantage on all of its attack rolls. As for the miniature itself, I think it's perfectly fine. It could definitely be used as a wild shape if you're exploring the ocean, which is useful. I give it a 4 out of 10. Up next, we have ourselves a sea spawn. As sea elves are the elves of the ocean, and sahagan are the orcs of the ocean, these are the undead of the ocean. On average, sea spawn are the result of people dying at sea, or somebody falling off a ship and dying. However, there are instances where someone can become a sea spawn as a natural part of their lifespan. This is usually done by some ancient ritual involving a kraken, however. Now you may think that sea spawn all look similar, but you couldn't be further from the truth. You see, some of them are born with arms and legs, while some of them are birthed with tentacles instead. Sea spawns have a challenge rating of 1 and a poisonous quills attack, which can poison its opponent up to 1 minute. As for the miniature itself, I think it's really good. We have an older one we can compare it to as well, and just by looking at the two, you can see a massive improvement in both sculpt and color, and just an overall detail as well. I absolutely love the paint job on this miniature and all the little details they added along the way. I think its pose is very zombie-like, which is exactly what it's supposed to be, an underwater zombie. I think what really separates it from the old one and other undead miniatures that we have is that the black underneath its eyes really helps that angry dead expression really pop. So overall, I give this miniature an 8 out of 10. Up next, we have ourselves a druid. As rangers work to protect nature, druids, they strive to be a part of it. In the Forgotten Realms, druids are often found in forests or living in groves with circles of their own kind. They are one with nature and are able to attune to the elemental magics of the wild. At 2nd level, they have the ability to wild shape, and the higher level they become, the more powerful beasts they can become as well. When they finally become truly one with nature, they become an archdruid, who can transform at a whim to whatever creature it wants. Archdruids are truly one with nature, and, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. This here is just an ordinary druid. We have an archdruid miniature later on in this set that we'll be reviewing, so no spoilers. Overall, I like this miniature. She can get away with being any kind of elf, half-elf, or even a human if you'd like. And alongside being a great druid miniature, this could also pass as a wonderful wizard, or sorcerer, or even warlock. And like most of our miniatures, this could be a wonderful NPC as well. Overall, I give it a 7 out of 10. Up next, we have another Locathah, except this one's holding a little crossbow. Aww. Okay, now as for the miniature itself, I really like this one, opposed to the other Locathah we just reviewed. I just enjoy its crossbow more than the ordinary spear that the other one had, and I enjoy that this one is more of a lighter tint of green as compared to the other one as well. The spear just seemed to warp a lot easier compared to the crossbow, and the crossbow itself, like the model, is just a lot more solid. Overall, another great Locathah miniature. I give it an 8 out of 10. Next up, we have a sword wraith warrior. Now, despite the fact that they have wraith in their name, they share little to no resemblance with an actual wraith, and their circumstances for being created are actually very unique. You see, when a warrior who is obsessed with glory dies without honor, it may rise again as a sword wraith warrior, destined to haunt the lands of the now ancient battlefield which it used to fight in. Their rage fuels them to slay more and more enemies in hopes that this might be the one to bring honor to them finally. They can strike you down with their battle axe and longbow, though this miniature seems to have a sword, unlike the art it was modeled after in Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse, which, that's odd, but as all weapons are in D&D, they're interchangeable. Your average sword wraith warrior has a challenge rating of 3, and as for the miniature itself, I think it's really cool. Quite frankly, this miniature can pass as any kind of spectral undead you can throw at your players. It can be a good ghost, specter, or even a wraith. This could be a great foreboding spirit you can throw at your players to warn them of any dangers in the upcoming path. Despite the fact that this creature's lawful evil, you can make it just about any alignment, and I could see a wonderful adventure, maybe even a little one-shot, about sending your players to bring honor to this poor lost soul. Plenty of possibilities for this miniature. I give it an 8 out of 10. Next up, we have a water elemental Myrmidon. Like a lot of creatures in this box set, its stat block can be found in Monsters of the Multiverse. Why summon a normal water elemental that can talk back to you and be a general nuisance, when you can simply just summon one, bind it to a suit of armor, and strip it of all free will and memories of its former life? If you go that route, you will have yourself a water elemental Myrmidon. As I just said, they are elementals conjured and bound by magic into ritually created suits and plates of armor. In this form, they possess absolutely no recollection of their former existence as a free elemental. They now exist only to follow the commands of their creators. They have a challenge rating of 7 and a freezing strike, where the Myrmidon uses multi-attack. Each attack that hits deals an extra 5 or 1d10 cold damage. Anyone who is hit by one or more of these attacks has its speed reduced by 10 feet until the end of the Myrmidon's next turn. As for the miniature itself, I think it's really cool. It has an absolutely beautiful paint job. It just looks so old and ancient, and the water effect looks absolutely wonderful as well. Its trident is prone to warping, which happens, but it's fixable. Overall, I really enjoy this miniature. I give it a 9 out of 10. Up next, we have a Quipper Swarm. This is another miniature that doesn't need a lot of explaining because it's just a bunch of piranhas, basically. Though I do want to mention that this miniature as a concept is very cool, and I feel like it was executed wonderfully. I would have never thought to make a school of fish a miniature. Besides your average bite attack, it has a blood frenzy, where the swarm has advantage on melee attack rolls against any creature that doesn't have all of its hit points. This swarm has a challenge rating of 1. As for the miniature itself, I think it's very clever. Despite the fact that it's a pile of fish, I think they really did a good job at giving it depth. I like the paint job too. You can see all of its little eyes, which is hard to do for most miniatures. Overall, I really like this miniature. I give it an 8 out of 10. Up next, we have a Sahagan Coral Smasher. Of all the Sahagan in their ranks, these are the strongest Sahagan warriors. Most Sahagan use spears and tridents and other weapons that can easily move in the water, while the Coral Smashers decide to use hammers. Their physical strength overcomes the resistance of the water as they swing their hammers at structures and foes with equal zeal. Sahagan Coral Smashers have a challenge rating of 1. They wield a warhammer, as seen in the miniature, and have a special ability called Siege Monster, where the Coral Smasher deals double damage to objects and structures. So better hope you don't try to lock yourself behind a door, I guess. As for the miniature itself, I like it. Besides the warhammer, there's nothing that really separates it from any other Sahagan. Therefore, it can probably be substituted for any ordinary Sahagan. The paint job's really nice. I like its tail. I like the green and purple mixed. That's a wonderful color combination. And I also like its little seaweed vest it has on the front of it. Its facial expression is very well detailed. I think the paint job as a whole is fine, it's acceptable. The head of the hammer seems to be prone to warping, so might want to watch out for that. But overall, I think it is a perfectly fine miniature. I give it a 6 out of 10. Next up, we have a sea hag. Sea hags are the Ursula of D&D, and they hate everything that's beautiful. They're the weakest of all the hags, and only have a mere challenge rating of 2. They prefer to live in swamps and underwater caves as opposed to normal houses like all the rest of the hags. The sea hag has a couple of special actions, one of them being an illusory appearance, where the hag covers herself and anything she's wearing or carrying with a magical illusion that makes her look like an ugly creature, well, or uglier creature, of her general size and humanoid shape. The hag has a horrific appearance, where if any humanoid that starts its turn within 30 feet of the hag can see the hag's true form, it must make a DC 11 wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, the creature is frightened for 1 minute. Okay, no big deal, right? Well, that's where you'd be wrong. You see, along with that, she also has a death glare, where the hag targets one frightened creature she can see within 30 feet of her. If the target can see the hag, it must succeed on a DC 11 wisdom saving throw against this magic or drop to 0 hit points. Yeah, you heard that right. 0 hit points. Dead, if you will. Imagine being so hideous, people just die when they look at you. Now, as for the miniature itself, I think it's okay. Now, we've had some sea hag miniatures in the past, and unfortunately, they have all been very similar. Same old green hair and same old seaweed crotch cloth. As you can probably tell, I really enjoy it when WizKids makes miniatures that stand out from the normal art that they'd be associated with, or even miniatures in the past. Like, for example, making the sahagan that we reviewed earlier blue instead of green. It's little changes like that that makes the miniatures stand out from its competitors. So unfortunately, if you're looking to make a sea hag coven, you might need to settle with them being triplets because of the lack of variety in the miniatures. The warping at the ankles doesn't help either. I give it a 4 out of 10. Now up next, we have a swashbuckler. Swashbucklers are rogues at heart and are not lawful toward anybody but themselves. Alongside having a stat block of their own, they are in fact a rogue subclass. They focus on their training on the art of the blade, relying on speed, elegance, and charm in equal parts. A swashbuckler excels in single combat, and can fight with 2 weapons while safely darting away from an opponent. Your average NPC swashbuckler has a challenge rating of 3. As for the miniature itself, I think it's a wonderful rogue miniature for a player or as an NPC. It would fit in very nicely with a group of bandits or pirates. I enjoy the unique clothing that they chose for this miniature to have as well. It really makes it stand out from other boring bandit miniatures. Overall, I really like this one. I give it a solid 8 out of 10. Up next, we have a Merfolk Scout. Now, I was able to find a dishearteningly small amount of information about Merfolk Scouts, so we're just mainly going to stick to the stat block. Now, from what I was able to find in the book, perhaps this miniature represents the 2 merfolks named Talnad and Valas, who were kicked out of their tribe for stealing, and they have a giant octopus pet. It says that they use the Scout stat block, so I can put 2 and 2 together, Merfolk, Scout stat block, Merfolk Scout. Now, there is a stat block provided in D&D Beyond, so we're just going to be using that. They are chaotic evil and have a challenge rating of 1/2. They can attack you with their short swords and have keen hearing and sight, where it gives them advantage on perception checks that rely on, well, hearing and sight. As for the miniature itself, I like it, just like I like the other merfolk we recently reviewed. Same notes as I gave the other one. I like its tails and I like its scales. I give this one also a 6 out of 10. Up next, we have an air elemental myrmidon. Just like the water elemental myrmidon that we just reviewed, These are elementals that are summoned and contained in suits of armor, stripping them of all free will and memories of their former free life. What separates the two, besides the fact that they're two completely different elements, is their weapons and special attacks. The air elemental Myrmidon has a flail instead of the trident that the water one had. That and this Myrmidon has a lightning strike, where the Myrmidon makes one flail attack, and on a hit, the target takes an extra 18 or 48 lightning damage. If the target fails a Constitution saving throw, they'll be stunned until the end of the Myrmidon's next turn. As for the miniature itself, I like this one as well. Its dynamic pose is really eye-catching with that flail in its hand. The metal armor also translates very nicely to the transparent air underneath. Honestly, this miniature could get away with being a possessed suit of armor. Overall, I'm a big fan of this miniature. I give it a 9 out of 10. Next up, we have ourselves a pirate captain. Pirate captains spend their lives at sea, earning and keeping the command of their crew. A captain's impressive sword work and biting words inspire both confidence and fear in a ship's crew. Pirate captains have a challenge rating of 2, and they have an ability called Sea Legs, where the captain has advantage on ability checks and saving throws to resist being knocked prone. On average, they're decked out with a hand crossbow and a longsword, just like what the miniature has. But by far, probably the best thing found in their stat block is their reaction, called Shape Up Ya Dog, where whenever a friendly creature within 30 feet of the captain can hear it miss an attack, the captain can yell perilous threats to allow that creature to re-roll the attack roll. There's so many fun roleplay opportunities with that reaction alone, and it gives the DM the perfect opportunity to pull out that pirate voice they've been waiting to use. As for the miniature itself, I really like this one. They could have easily gone with the normal human or half-elf to represent the pirate captain, but instead they chose a tiefling, and I think it suits a pirate captain perfectly. I love all the little details as well, like her braids and the ring on her tail. Her whole costume is absolutely perfect and suits a pirate captain wonderfully. This could also make a wonderful rogue miniature as well. I can definitely see someone using this as one of their player characters. I absolutely love this one. It's definitely one of my favorites in this entire box set. I give it a 10 out of 10. Up next we have Scum. This deep sea oddity is the result of when someone has succumbed to an aboleth's magic through its disease-bearing touch. The victim barely remembers its past form, their skin turns slimy and translucent while their limbs warp into, well, whatever this is. The change makes them dependent on water, which they must immerse themselves in regularly lest they experience painful, and potentially lethal, skin eruptions. This poor creature, on top of all this, is bound to their aboleth master, and is forced to serve their every sinister whim. Scum have a challenge rating of 5, and a unique action called Mind-Breaking Touch, which deals psychic damage, and the target has disadvantage on wisdom saving throws until the end of the Scum's next turn. As for the miniature itself, I think this one's really cool. We had a Scum in the past, but it didn't have any weapons on it, so this one having a trident is very unique. Speaking of the trident, it is a little bit warped, which isn't great, but like all the other spears and tridents we've had in this set, soak it in some warm water and it'll probably fix it. Overall, I give this miniature a solid 6 out of 10. Up next, we have a Hydroloth. A Hydroloth is a type of Yugoloth, which can be hired to do, well, just about anything in the water that involves killing. Yugoloths are basically fiends for hire, and one can be found for just about any type of job. Fair warning before purchasing, they require a very high price, and if somebody else pays them more, they will happily stab you in the back without even thinking. Each type of Yugoloth is different and special in its own way, though they all have one thing in common, which is they're all really good at killing. Though Hydroloth's specialty is killing underwater. Along with that, they are also gifted with a bunch of abilities that involve memories. They have an ability called Steal Memory, which they can use once a day, where the Hydroloth targets one creature it can see within 60 feet of it. The target takes 46 psychic damage, and it must make an intelligence saving throw. On a successful save, the target becomes immune to the Hydroloth's steel memory for 24 hours. But on a failed save, the target loses all proficiencies, it can't cast spells, it can't understand language, and its intelligence and charisma score are dropped down to 5. Each time the target finishes a long rest, it can repeat the saving throw to end the effect on itself. Unlike its victims, the Hydroloth has a secure memory, where the Hydroloth is immune to any effect that would steal or modify its memories, or delete or read its thoughts. Alongside this, it has a variety of spells it can use, such as Darkness, Control Water, and Crown of Madness, to name a few. The Hydroloth has a challenge rating of 9, and as for the miniature itself, I think this one's really cool. I like its creepy crouched over frog position. I think the paint was really well done. The spikes on the back are really nice and textured and detailed, and they did a good job on its eyes as well. Overall, I think it is a perfectly fine miniature. I give it a 7 out of 10. Up next, we have a Prepainted. Now, really quick, this miniature was actually based off of the design given in Ghost of Saltmarsh for the monstrous Prepainted, which had an intimidating challenge rating of 11 and possessed legendary actions. The monstrous Prepainted was a large creature, but this one is only medium. Nobody really knows where their origins came from, though Wild Beyond the Witchlight seem to hint at the fact that they might come from transformed humans. And this is seen in their shadows. You see, despite the fact that they are bird-like creatures, their shadows resemble that of a humanoid. The Prepainted has a challenge rating of 2, and has all sorts of different attacks, such as a gore attack and a talons attack. As for the miniature itself, I think it's pretty good. We have had some Prepainteds in the past, which you can see right now, and a lot of the ones in the other box sets seem to be a lot more detailed than this one. However, I do understand that all of these were based off of different art pieces depicting Prepainteds, so it's not that bad. I do think that all three of them combined provide enough variety so that you can tell the difference between them when they're on the battle map. But overall, I think this miniature is perfectly fine. I give it a 6 out of 10. Up next, we have an Aldani, or lobsterfolk if you want to be technical. Aldani are found in the island of Chult. They live in lakes and streams, though they're very xenophobic and prefer to keep to themselves. Despite their terrifying appearance, they are neutral creatures, and they avoid violence as much as possible. They have a challenge rating of 1 and a claw attack which can grapple an opponent. As for the miniature itself, I think it's pretty cool. Despite the fact that they exist in Chult alone, you can easily add this into any kind of aquatic encounter. The dry brush on its shell really makes all the little details pop as well, which that's a bonus. Though I can't get over its gross little humanoid face. Ugh. Overall, I give it a 6 out of 10. Next up, we have a sahagan hatchling swarm. This is a very interesting miniature. I wasn't expecting one of these, but I think it works. Altogether, these creatures make a challenge rating 3, and they have all sorts of different little abilities as well, some of which good, some of which aren't so good. One of the good parts being, the swarm can occupy another creature's space, and vice versa. One of the bad parts is, it has an ability called Seething, where once it enters combat, the swarm deals 10 damage to itself at the end of its turn if it did not make an attack on that turn. So basically these little critters are always eating, and if they aren't eating their opponents, they're eating each other. It is unable to die from this though, and partially because at least one of them still needs to be standing. As for this miniature itself, it is our first large miniature in this whole box set, but it certainly won't be our last. As mentioned, it does have a swarm ability where the swarm can occupy another creature's space, and this is performed very well with the miniature, as there's enough room in the middle to put your average-sized medium or small miniature in the middle. Overall, this is a really cool and unique miniature. I give it a 7 out of 10. Up next, we have a giant octopus. It is exactly as it looks like. It is a giant octopus. I know that at least one of them shows up in Ghost of Saltmarsh because one happens to be the pet of 2 particular Merfolk scouts. The giant octopus has a challenge rating of 1 and a couple different tricks up its multiple sleeves. It has an ability called Underwater Camouflage. Just like octopi in real life, the octopus has advantage on stealth checks made while underwater. Along with that, they have a Tentacles attack, where they can grapple creatures and hit them with bludgeoning damage. Alongside that, they also have an Ink Cloud as well. As for the miniature itself, I think this one's really cool. It would be great for a higher level druid to be able to wild shape into. That or something to polymorph into. The basic maroon color is fine, the eyes really pop, and you could tell that they added some black oil to make all the little details and wrinkles come out. But overall, I think it's fine. I give it a 6 out of 10. Up next we have a hippogriff. Hippogriffs are magical, fantastical creatures possessing the wings and forearms of an eagle and the hindquarters of a horse. According to its description, the head is a combination of both a horse and an eagle, though I only see the eagle. These creatures are feral in nature and don't have any kind of intelligence or language that would surpass that of a regular horse. I believe they are a summonable creature for Conjure Greater Steed if you have a paladin on your team, but besides that, they are a challenge rating 1 creature. They have a beak attack and a claw attack, and keen sight, where the hippogriff has advantage on perception checks that rely on sight. As for the miniature itself, you know, I like it. It almost makes me want to play a paladin so I could summon one of these. These creatures are relatively common in D&D adventures, and if not, this is a polymorphable creature, so you could just polymorph someone into it. The paint job on this miniature is really good as well. You can tell that they use some black oil to make all the feathers super detailed. That, and I also really like the pink that they dry brushed alongside its neck. It's the little details like that that make this miniature really great. Overall, I give it a solid 8 out of 10. Up next we have probably one of my favorite miniatures in this whole set, the Crabfolk. Now I'm sure the Crabfolk has different origins, but from what I can find, its stat block is found in a supplement guide found on D&D Beyond called Mordenkainen's Fiendish Folio. These neutral large crustaceans were once ogres that were transformed by an old green hag to be more useful servants in the far past. All crabfolk found today are descendants of those few ogres. Above all other treasures, the green hag that created them loved silver. So, she embedded inside of them the insatiable appetite for treasure, particularly silver. Crabfolk will go out of their way to acquire any kind of silver to add it to their giant hoards. I could make a whole video on crabfolk lore, but we're just going to leave it there for now. The Crabfolk has a challenge rating of 3 and a claw attack where it's able to grapple its opponents. As for the miniature itself, I really like this one. Despite the fact that it's a creepy crustacean, I think that its design is absolutely adorable. I really like its paint job as well. It makes it look like it actually has little plates of armor on its chest and abdomen. In my opinion, this miniature is the perfect mix of adorable and intimidating. I might just be a sucker for crabs, but I'm giving this one a 10 out of 10. Up next, we have a giant sea eel. These snaking predators lurk in the dark waters of the ocean, and usually serve as guards and mounts for the Locathah. And now reading that out loud, I want nothing more than a miniature of a Locathah riding one of these. The giant sea eel has a challenge rating of 1/2, and a bite attack to go along with it. Now, as for the miniature itself, I think it's pretty nice. Now, I'm not too much of a fan of props being on the miniature's base, and by prop I mean the coral piece underneath the eel. I think it would have been perfectly fine with a transparent piece like all of the other miniatures that aren't standing. But no, instead they gave it this weird little beige coral piece underneath. But coral aside, I think that the miniature itself looks pretty nice. They clearly dry brushed it with a white, which makes it look more oily and eel-like. I think the miniature's fine in total. It could be another miniature that can be used for a wild shape for a druid, if one would ever want to transform into a giant sea eel. Overall, not too much of a big fan of this miniature. It could be worse, I've seen worse, but overall, I give it a 4 out of 10. Up next, we have a giant lizard. This one is self-explanatory. It's a giant lizard. and a very well detailed one at that. Giant lizards can be found just about anywhere where civilization isn't. They are a challenge rating 1/4 creature, and they have a bite attack as well. As for the miniature itself, I really like this one. I think that they did a wonderful job dry brushing the white onto the turquoise to really make it look old and crusty instead of slimy like how most people think lizards are. Once again, another great creature to wild shape into as well, or polymorph someone. Overall, I give this critter a 6 out of 10. Next up, we have ourselves a plesiosaur. This predatory marine reptile is a cousin to our beloved dinosaurs and attacks any creature it encounters. Its long and flexible neck lets it twist in any direction to deliver a powerful bite. In the supplement book found in D&D Beyond, The Tortle Package, there is a plesiosaur with 2 heads, though I'm happy we just have the one-headed one. These creatures have a challenge rating of 2, and, as mentioned before, a powerful bite attack which deals 3d6 plus 4 piercing damage. As for the miniature itself, I really like this one, and not because I'm biased to any and all prehistoric miniatures. Rather, I think the design on this one is spectacular. I absolutely love all the little spots that it has all on its backside. They didn't need to add that, but they did. The beautiful light blue on its back matched with the dark blue spots really makes the miniature pop when out on the table. That, and I never thought I'd be so happy to see the transparent plastic underneath it. I'm glad they didn't give it the giant sea eel coral treatment. Overall, I really enjoy this miniature. I give it a 10 out of 10. Up next, we have the nefarious Wastrelith. These aquatic demons are not to be trifled with. Otherwise known as water lords, they are found in aquatic environments throughout the lower planes. Wastreliths establish themselves as lords of the deep and rule their dominions with cruelty. They corrupt the water around them, and any creature that were to ingest the water risks their very souls. Those who drink the poisonous liquid might wither away until they finally die, or they remain alive only to become thralls of chaos and evil. The Wastrelith has an intimidating challenge rating of 13, and as for the miniature itself, I think this one's alright overall. We don't have any miniatures to represent these creatures, so glad we finally have one. The art that this miniature is based off of, though, I couldn't help but notice is a bit more colorful than the miniature that we have. You see, the art has splashes of blue and yellow and orange, while this one's top half just is pink. Maybe someday Nolzur's Marvelous Miniatures will release an unpainted version of this, and I'll be able to paint it myself. But until then, I think this miniature is okay. I give it a 6 out of 10. Up next, we have a sea lion. These large marine mammals live alongside coastal regions around islands and seas. Sea lions have a challenge rating of 1/2. They have a bite attack and a claw attack, and that's it. It can hold its breath for 15 minutes, which is impressive, until you find out that a manatee can hold its breath for 20. As for the miniature itself, I think it's pretty good. I really like the texture of the hair, alongside with the scales and pebbly skin as well. Its face is wonderfully detailed too. It has a very intimidating presence, and overall, I really enjoy this miniature. I give it an 8 out of 10. Now we're back to some more medium and small miniatures, and up next we have an Archdruid. Archdruids watch over the natural wonders of their domain, and seldom interact with folk away from their druid groves and shrines. An Archdruid typically has one or more pupils who are just regular druids, and an Archdruid's lair is usually guarded by loyal beasts and fey creatures. Your average Archdruid has a challenge rating of 12. They have an action called Wildfire, where they're able to attack you with fire damage and blind you until the druid's next turn. They also have plenty of spells to choose from, a couple being Beast Sense, Speak with Animals, Dominate Beast, Fairy Fire, and Tree Stride. They can also change shape twice a day into either a beast or an elemental with a challenge rating of 6 or less, and can remain in that form for 9 hours. As for the miniature itself, this one is definitely one of my favorites. They really went all out on the details on this miniature, from the tattoos on its abdomen and chest, to the spell effect coming out of his staff. You can tell such a story with this miniature, from all the little trinkets hanging from his belt. This would make a wonderful player character, especially for a higher level druid. Overall, I really enjoy this miniature. I give it a solid 10 out of 10. Next up, we have a blue Abishai. Each Abishai was once a mortal who somehow won the favor of Tiamat before death, and as a reward, found its soul transformed into this. Tiamat often deploys Abishai as her agents, sending them forth to represent her interests in the Hells and across the multiverse. An Abishai can come in 5 different colors representing each of Tiamat's 5 different dragon heads: black, blue, red, green, and even white. Some are weaker than others, the weakest being white and thus the most common, while the strongest being red and the most rare to find. Though sitting comfortably right underneath the red Abishai are the blue ones. They usually act as the seekers of forgotten lore and lost relics. They are the most cunning and learned of their kind as well. Through their discoveries through the multiverse, they have become very well accomplished spellcasters. The blue Abishai has a beefy challenge rating of 17, and innate spellcasting where they're able to cast such spells as Disguise Self, Charm Person, Greater Invisibility, and Wall of Force. They also have a lightning strike which deals 8d8 lightning damage. They're also able to teleport at will up to 30 feet in an unoccupied space. Now, as for the miniature itself, I think that this one's really cool. They chose a really nice blue for this miniature, and I think it makes the miniature really pop. I like all the little gadgets on its belt, and I think its staff is really ornate. Also, the lightning effect looks really cool. I like its sunken eyes and all the little details and wrinkles around the miniature as well. The staff is capable of warping, which happens, so I give it a 9 out of 10. Up next, we have a Kraken Priest. A Kraken can seem godlike to folks who have faced its fury, those who mistake its might for divine power, and those who seek to appease the monster through variations, are sometimes rewarded with power. These people are transformed into Kraken Priests. Every Kraken Priest undergoes a change in appearance that reflects the Kraken's influence, although each one differs in how their reverence is displayed. One Kraken Priest might have ink-black eyes and a suckered tentacle for a tongue, while others might have featureless faces and a body covered in eyes. These absolutely horrific manifestations intensify when the Kraken itself possesses its minion and speaks through them. The Kraken Priest has a challenge rating of 5, and spellcasting as well, where it's able to cast spells such as Command, Create and Destroy Water, and Control Water as well. It also has a terrifying ability called Voice of the Kraken, where its Kraken Master speaks through the priest with a thunderous voice audible within 300 feet. Creatures of the priest's choice that can hear the Kraken's words must succeed on a DC 14 Wisdom saving throw or be frightened of the priest for 1 minute. Now, as for the miniature itself, I think it's really cool. We've had another Kraken Priest miniature in the past, which you can see right now. Despite the fact that there are a lot of similarities between the two, there are enough differences to separate them as well. Both of these could easily be used as twin priests who serve the same Kraken Lord. I think the symbols on its chest and head really show up well on this miniature, and I like the tentacles on its back, those are cool as well. Overall, I give this miniature a solid 7 out of 10. This one is definitely one of my top 3 miniatures in this whole box set, solely for the fact of its pose alone. Here we have a Sahagan Priestess. Sahagan worship the shark god Sekolah. Only female Sahagans are deemed worthy of channeling the god's power, and priestesses hold tremendous sway in Sahagan communities. They have a challenge rating of 2 and a whole bunch of cleric spells to choose from, such as Guidance, Thaumaturgy, Hold Person, and Spiritual Weapon to name a few. Now, as for the miniature itself, I have mixed feelings. The paint job is nothing special, and it seems to be just layered with a base coat of paint, and they didn't even bother to add on any black oil to make its shoulder pads or tail pop at all. However, I can put all of this aside because I absolutely love this miniature's pose, as it's holding one of its little hatchlings and one of its little priestly sticks in its hand. The lifeless black dots for eyes looks absolutely hilarious, and I think that this is the only sahagan miniature we've ever had that has a nose. I just love how it looks like it's about to perform some weird baptism or about to throw its baby at you. Overall, I like this miniature more than it deserves to be liked, and I give it an 8 out of 10. Up next, we have an Aarakocra. These large birds are often found in high mountains and atop tall trees. They love to fly and will spend hours, if not days, locking their wings and keeping in perfect suspension in the air. They take pride in their plumage and will go great lengths to make sure that their plumage stays in perfect condition. As you may know, Aarakocra are a playable race. Because they can't fly when wearing medium or heavy armor, that makes them natural rogues or monks as well. At 3rd level, the Aarakocra is granted the ability Wind Caller, where they're able to cast the spell Gust of Wind without requiring any material components. They can also make an unarmed strike with their talons as well. As for the miniature itself, I really like this one. You can tell that they definitely intend for you to use this miniature, whether as an NPC or as a player character. I absolutely love the detail on the wings and the armor as well. My one little grievance is that the spear is, well, can you guess it? Warped. So overall, I really enjoy this miniature. It makes me want to actually play as an Aarakocra. I give it a 9 out of 10. Next up, we have a Tortle Druid. Many Tortles view the world as a place of wonder. They live for the chance to hear a small wind blowing through the trees, to watch a frog croaking on a lily pad, or to stand in a crowded marketplace. A Tortle Druid savors such things more than most, channeling the natural magic of the world around them. As for its stat block, a Tortle Druid has a challenge rating of 2. They have access to such druid spells as Druidcraft, Cure Wounds, Hold Person, and Speak with Animals, to name a few. Now, as for the miniature itself, I think this one's fine. Personally, I like the other Tortle that we previously reviewed. I think it was number 4 on the list, but it just seemed to have more details on its skin and on its shell. The spell effect on this one's pretty cool, and the staff is not warped. It's a miracle. Overall, I give this miniature a 6 out of 10. Up next, we have a Lizard Queen. A Lizard Queen is a lizard folk that has above average intelligence. They're often armed with a great trident, which they can wield with great strength and skill. Lizard Queens are ruthless and ambitious, seeking only to expand their territory and influence by any means necessary. The other lizard folk that follow her obey her commands without question. The Lizard Queen has a challenge rating of 4, and alongside having a special trident attack, has a skewer ability that goes along with it, where once per turn, when the lizard folk makes a melee attack and hits with its trident, the target takes an extra 3d6 damage. To make things worse, the lizard folk gains temporary hit points equal to the damage dealt. Now, as for the miniature itself, I really like this one. And that just might be my lizard folk bias shining through, but I just think this is a really good miniature. She fits in wonderfully with all the other lizard folk that WizKids has released as well. I absolutely love her crown on her head, of it being the skull of a ram. She truly looks like lizard folk royalty, especially with the trident by her side. And speaking of the trident, I think it's an absolutely wonderful piece to have in this miniature. It clearly looks like it's been delicately crafted together with a bunch of other creatures' bones to make it. It's a very intimidating weapon indeed. I really like the bright purple feathers that go along with her as well. It really makes her stand out when among a bunch of other lizard folk. That, and I also like her dynamic, commanding pose as well. Overall, totally not being biased toward lizard folks at all. I give this one an easy 10 out of 10. Up next, we have a spectator. A spectator is a type of lesser beholder, which has the sole purpose of guarding whatever the summoner asks it to guard. These creatures can be summoned via a magical ritual that involves 4 eye stalks of a real beholder. The summoner's spectator guards a location or a treasure of its summoner's choice for exactly 101 years, allowing no creature but its summoner to enter the area or access the item, unless the summoner instructs otherwise. Though beholders are disloyal and deceitful creatures, spectators are not. Spectators are civil while on guard, openly discussing its orders and its summoner. However, even a brief conversation with a spectator is enough to reveal quirks in its personality brought on by years of isolation. When a spectator has fulfilled its services, it is free to do as it pleases. Many take up residence in the places it previously guarded, especially if their summoners died. Suddenly, with a newfound lack of purpose, the spectator's previous flickers of madness begin to flourish. The spectator has a challenge rating of 3 and an array of different eye rays it can use, such as a confusion ray, a paralysis ray, a fear ray, and even a wounding ray. Now, as for the miniature itself, I think this one's pretty cool. I really like the detail in its pebbly skin, and I think that the black oil that they used on it really makes all the details pop. The detail in its eye is also something to be commended as well. However, I'm not a huge fan of the mouth. From a front angle, it looks perfectly fine, but on its side, it just looks weird. It doesn't really have a gaping mouth, more of it looks like somebody painted over pre-existing flesh that it had. Overall, I think the miniature is pretty good. I give it an 8 out of 10. Next up, we have a pirate wizard. These salt-encrusted practitioners of magic are at once learned and superstitious. They magically step from place to place and unleash their briny magic against attackers. The pirate deck wizard has a challenge rating of 1. They are, in fact, a 4th level spellcaster and have an array of different wizard spells to choose from. They have such useful spells as Mage Armor, Fog Cloud, and Gust of Wind. Overall, this is a very nice gnome miniature, though with its small stature it could easily pass as a halfling as well. The spell effect in its hand is really cool too. It could be used as preparing a fire bolt or a fireball, maybe even a flaming sphere. This miniature could easily pass as any kind of spell casting class and would make a wonderful PC as well. Overall, I think this miniature is fine. I give it a solid 6 out of 10. Up next, we have a Marid. Marids are the genies of water and consider themselves to be the masters of the seas. They hail from the elemental plane of water and have almost complete dominion over it. They're wonderfully magical creatures and can even match arc wizards in terms of spellcasting ability. They're also master storytellers as well, and above all other stories they share, they love the ones that glorify themselves the most. As all genies are capable of doing, Marids can grant a wish. A genie can grant up to 3 wishes for a creature that isn't a genie itself. Once a genie has granted its limit of wishes, it can't grant wishes again for a long amount of time, usually like a year. The Marid has an intimidating challenge rating of 11. Alongside with spellcasting, the Marid has many different ways of defending itself, such as with its trident, where it deals 2d6 plus 6 piercing damage, or 2d8 plus 6 piercing damage if using 2 hands to make the attack. That and a water jet attack, which deals 6d6 bludgeoning damage and can push someone away up to 20 feet. Now, as for the miniature itself, I really like this one. It has such a dynamic pose bursting out of the water. The trident is also very well done as well. It's a really nice color and I like the little pearl it has in the middle. As for the water itself, I think the water is fine. It's a good color. I've painted better water in my time, but who am I to complain? Overall, I really like this miniature. I give it a solid 9 out of 10. Up next, we have a combination of two miniatures, a giant seahorse and a sea elf. This isn't just any ordinary miniature, this is a modular miniature, where the sea elf can be removed from the back of the giant seahorse to make its own individual standing miniature. We've had more than a couple like these in the past, though they're not really interchangeable across different sets. Interchanging them is really easy also. All you have to do is pop off the saddle from the giant seahorse and put the upper torso of the sea elf onto its other pair of legs. Here's the seahorse without its passenger. It's a nice standalone miniature, though I don't see you getting a lot of use out of it unless your campaign takes place underwater. The paint job on it's really good though. They really went all out on that dry brushing on top of the red to really make a solid colored creature really stand out. It also has a very ornate saddle and it glistens in the light and it looks really cool. And here's our unmounted sea elf. This one's a really cool miniature as well, though I couldn't help but notice that the staff she's holding is warped. Shocker. But as for the miniature itself, this one's a really cool one. The paint job is wonderful on it, and they really went all out on her design. With that staff, it could be a wonderful spellcaster, or even a paladin. As a DM, I would totally make a giant seahorse a summonable steed. Overall, I love these modular miniatures. They're so fun and cool to disassemble and reassemble into something brand new. I think I give this miniature a 9 out of 10. Up next, we have ourselves an aboleth. Aboleths are not to be trifled with. They usually live in subterranean lakes and rocky depths of the ocean, often surrounded by the ruins of ancient fallen aboleth cities. An aboleth spends most of its existence underwater, surfacing occasionally to treat with visitors or worshippers if it has any. They have a challenge rating of 10 and a whole variety of different ways to kill you. They can hit you with their tentacles, where on top of dealing 2d6 plus 5 bludgeoning damage, they can also disease you if you fail a constitution saving throw. And this disease isn't your common cold. No. If you fail that constitution saving throw, you have 1 minute to be cured of the disease. After 1 minute, the diseased creature's skin becomes translucent and slimy. Suddenly, the creature can no longer breathe air and can only breathe underwater. This player character breaking disease can only be healed by a heal spell or any other disease curing spell of 6th level or higher. The aboleth also has a number of legendary actions as well. 3 to be precise. It has different legendary actions such as making a perception check or making a tail attack. That and Psychic Drain, where one creature charmed by the aboleth takes 3d6 psychic damage, and the aboleth regains hit points equal to the damage the creature took. That sort of stuff. Also, did I mention that the aboleth can enslave people? Charm people with its enslave ability? Yeah, this is a horrible creature. As for the miniature itself, I think this one's really cool. I think compared to other aboleth miniatures we've had in the past, the orange tentacles really make this one stand out among the rest. Where I believe other aboleth miniatures in the past went for more purple tentacles or not even changing the tentacle colors at all. With the orange tentacles in mind, this one definitely takes inspiration from the aboleth found in Ghost of Saltmarsh. As for the rest of the paint job, I think it's very well done. The eyes show up very well in the miniature, and the lamprey mouth looks really cool. Overall, I'm a very big fan of this miniature. I give this one a 9 out of 10. And for our last miniatures of the box sets, we have a dragon turtle wormling. Dragon turtles are considered among the most dangerous aquatic creatures in existence. Though not being actual dragons themselves, they share a lot of characteristics of a true dragon. A certain characteristic that comes to mind is being obsessed with treasure and gold. In order to satiate this hunger for treasure and gold, they often attack as many ships as they possibly can, so that they can shift through the wreckage and pull out anything they deem to be valuable. Sailors quickly caught on to this and found that they're able to bribe the dragon turtle with dropping treasure off their ship, so to grant them safe passage. Dragon turtle wormlings, however, do none of these things. They're too small. Dragon turtle wormlings have a challenge rating of 4. They speak Draconic, unlike their elder siblings who can speak Aquan and Draconic, and they have a bite attack and a steam breath attack, and that's it. As for the miniature itself, I really like this one, though I don't think that it should have been the capstone miniature of this box set. I feel like that would have been good for, the aboleth, or the sea elf riding the giant seahorse. But overall, I think the miniature is pretty good. They really went all in with the dry brushing on top of the solid dark blue that makes up the entirety of this miniature. I think it has a very funny design, and with it being a little wormling, it has more of a chance to actually show up in your campaign. Overall, I think this is a pretty good miniature. I give it a 9 out of 10. Ha, you thought we were done. Not a chance. For our final miniature, we are reviewing the premium miniature of the Seas and Shores box set, the Maw of Sekolah. The Maw of Sekolah is a boss found in Ghost of Saltmarsh, Chapter 6, The Final Enemy. The Maw of Sekolah is summoned from the shadowy depths of the ocean through ritual and tidal magic and stands as an avatar of the hungry sahagan god, Sekolah. This huge two-headed shark is fed a steady diet of sentient creatures captured by the sahagan and offered as a tribute. The Maw of Sekolah has a challenge rating of 7 and many different tactics up its fins. Alongside its average bite and tail smash attack, it also has a bunch of legendary actions to choose from. It has a legendary action called Speed of Sekolah, where the Maw of Sekolah can move up to its speed. Basically, it takes the dash action, but for free. One of its best legendary actions has to go to its Feed action, which costs 2 actions, where the ferocity of the spirit of Sekolah flashes through the water, tearing through the foes of the Maw of Sekolah. Each creature of the Maw's choosing within 60 feet of it must make a dexterity saving throw, or take 2d6 slashing damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. It also has a legendary resistance which can be used twice a day, where if the Maw of Sekolah fails a saving throw, it can simply choose to succeed instead. As for the miniature itself, I really like this one. This miniature almost makes me consider running Ghost of Saltmarsh. It has such a dynamic and ferocious pose. I absolutely love all the little details inside of its mouth, or mouths. All of its ornaments and decorations hanging from it look wonderful as well. Overall, I think they did a wonderful job on this miniature, and I can definitely see why it's the premium one of all the miniatures in the box set. It's really cool. I give it a solid 10 out of 10. And here we are at the end of the video. Overall, the Seas and Shores box set is a wonderful set of miniatures, especially if you're wanting to run Ghost of Saltmarsh. For the longest time, Ghost of Saltmarsh has been criminally underrepresented in the miniature department. So I'm glad that fans of the book finally have miniatures to actually use in the campaign. If you enjoyed this video, click the like button, it really helps. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing so you can be notified of our next upload. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you here next time on Club Kobold.